go ahead and get started. We'll see if other people trickle in. So I haven't graded through yet. Usually I try to take about a week, so hopefully I'll be able to get to them this weekend and you'll know what's what. Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to not grade on the computer. It's just awful in its own way. Today we are going to start talking about bias in science, and it's supposed to be a discussion about the readings, but I realized, probably because we just had an exam, only like 2 people had actually done the perusal for today. So I'm moving our discussion of the articles to Friday. Please have read the perusal by Friday, even if you just skim through it and go back and make your comments later, just because it's going to be all about the articles, so you won't be able to participate and contribute if you have not actually read it. So just a kind of reminder as well about perusal. Okay, that's fine. That's what I'm trying to do, is launch it from my LMS. Oh, you know what? It's because I'm in student mode. Hang on. It thinks that I want to do it as a student. Alrighty. Yep, that was the issue. Okay. Okay. This one also has multiple parts. So just a reminder how to get to the multiple parts, or if you haven't figured out how to get to the multiple parts before, walking you through it. So you scroll to the end of the first article. This one looks a lot longer than it is because there are a lot of references. Okay, when you get to the bottom, it says continue assignment. Okay, and then you'll see most of the other readings are pretty short. And again, you get to the bottom of that and you keep clicking. So do make sure you, again, at least skim through these. And one of the things I wanted to point out to you is that part of what you're reading for tomorrow, let's get to it. Here we go, is actually a draft. So this is something APA sent out to their members, I think at the end of summer. Because it was like I had already sort of planned readings for this section, and I was like, oh, it's about to put this in. APA actually is coming up with an apology for psychology's role in promoting racism, discrimination, and human hierarchy. So the first short document is the resolution itself. So this is not final, they're still getting comment about it. And then the second related document is essentially, they call it a chronology, it's a timeline of essentially all the crummy stuff psychology has done over the years. So I think that this is really important if we're talking about bias in psychology, right? To think about the ways we have not been great in the past. So again, make sure that you at least skim this for Friday, because if you look at our quote unquote lecture for Friday for this class, it's just actually discussion questions. So that is that. So the first thing I'm going to have you all do, and it looks like most of you have brought your computers, which is great. So I'm going to go to assignments. And some of this is, replicating what we would do were we in Zoom, because I feel like some of this has really worked well. So if you go, under assignments on Blackboard, you'll see a group discussion on sources of bias. So if you click that link, I told it to open a new tab, apparently. Not so much. Okay, you'll see an activity like we filled out when we were on Zoom, and I'll have you all populate the answers there. Let's sort of figure out. I did this yesterday in my neuropsych class. It seemed to work pretty well. Let's just have you all count off by 4s, and then I'll have the 5th question go to our folks on Zoom. So you go to Blackboard and you go to assignments. And I will leave it up here for people to reference as well. So Tracy, you'll be 1, and then 2. Yep. Give it 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, find your number, and then you'll discuss the question associated with that number. And then Henry and Will, I'm gonna put you all in your own breakout room and you'll do question 5. So go ahead and actually move around, find each other. Getting you up and moving today to wake you up a little bit. Okay, and Henry and Will, I'm gonna do it for 5 minutes and we'll see if that's long enough. So you all are doing question 5. Oh, it's got like your old account with that. Oh, jeez.
It like acts like I'm still.
Oh, jeez. That's even if you link like from the VW webpage.
Yeah, like I'm on the black border now, and every time I try to open it, $1.
Oh, then it goes to that. Okay. Well, you've got 2 other folks who can help you with it, so. Let me get this out of your way in case you all need to see the questions. There we go. The same thing as if we were online, go ahead and type stuff in, and Aaron, we're in groups, so just pick one. Oh, yeah. I'm not even in groups, so just pick one. No, I just thought of everybody's way. Well, Henry, I'm gonna give you guys more time, so I'm just gonna pop you back into a room. Okie dokie. It looks like all the groups have at least something down. If you want to keep typing while we go to group one, feel free. But let's have group one talk about their question, which is, what are some of the common sources of bias you can imagine existing in scientific research in general? And you can look online for some examples. You okay?
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Oh.
So for the first one, oh wait.
Yeah, guys, we're gonna start going around with the different groups, so.
For the first one, we have observation bias, which is like what happens when participants are aware that they're being observed. Isn't that like a blind setting? What is it called? I know there's a double blind.
Oh, good question. So double blind, single blind are just to do with whether the participant knows whether they're getting the placebo or the control, and whether the researcher knows whether they're getting the placebo or the control. Yeah, if someone signs up for a study, they know they're being observed. So like you said, that's a problem in and of itself, right? It goes back to the idea that like you can't study something without changing it.
So the illusory bias is mixing a relationship between variables when there is no such relationship.
Yeah, what might be an example of that?
For example, we looked at, it's like yeah, like
Yeah, or if we're thinking, again, stepping back from psychology, just science in general. An example I've given before is Henrietta Lacks's cells. Like they first thought that they found other cells that could replicate like hers. And in fact, what it was is like her cells are just really good at getting into everything, right? And so like they would contaminate it. So yeah, this can apply to things where you're just working in petri dishes too.
We have my side bias, which is leaning towards like your observation. For example, that could be like believe in aliens, see evidence of aliens that probably.
Right. They're for aliens. Yeah.
We also have research bias, which I guess would that kind of like my side, like your research and stuff, like match up.
A little bit, yeah. And sometimes this is called like confirmation bias too, where you might be more likely to find results you've hypothesized. This is funny because this is something that like some people truly believe just happens in science regardless. And I remember my father, who's quite conservative, saying this to me once, and I was like, you know, I wish that was true. I'd have a lot more publishable data. So, but yeah, this can definitely happen.
Right, and we also have selection bias and then information bias, and selection has to do with like, just having a group that doesn't represent an entire population. And then information bias is that thinking, like, giving as much thought to your research as you need just to match your topic, even if it's irrelevant. I think.
It's really attacking you. Yeah, yeah, great job. So there's lots of different types of bias we have to look out for when we're doing any kind of science. So let me zoom out a little bit. I think I got a little ambitious in my zooming. So group 2, tell us about some of the common sources of bias you can imagine existing specifically in psychological scientific research.
Select bias, psychological science, kind of like not as a handpicking group, but like putting that out there, like you can get this description for this study, and like you go there and nobody matches that description. What are these results for? The same thing they said, it's got to represent the population, like just one sample size or something like that. So I mean, it's a bigger picture.
Yeah, I think that's such a good example. It makes me think of it's better now, but when I was in grad school, all the studies of therapy on patients with eating disorders had people who only had eating disorders. They would rule out anyone who had any kind of comorbid disorder. And like I saw one person in all my years of seeing patients with eating disorders who didn't have a comorbidity. So it's like, who are we actually creating this therapy for, right? It's not the actual patients who come to see you.
Another one is bias questioning, so like the way you like form your questions can lead to bias.
Yeah, definitely. So my assessment class is going to be working on this. They've got to create their own questions for a questionnaire, and you have to think about how do you word them. Do you want some what we call reverse coded, where you kind of do them in the opposite direction to try to like camouflage what you're actually trying to get at. I've seen extreme of that. So there's one questionnaire I've used where I think it's like 40 questions and 35 of them are reverse coded. It was like, okay, that's a lot. That was a lot of coding for me, right? And it's kind of going the other direction. But yeah, I think that that's a really good question. Like, you have to think about how you're asking things. Even something as simple as demographics. So, like when I do studies with LGBTQ plus populations, I'll have categories and say like, which one best fits how you would describe yourself? And then I always have a question that is, how would you actually describe your own sexuality? Right? Because for a lot of people, those categories don't actually fit. Yeah, but a lot of people don't do that. They just have checkboxes, and oftentimes they're using out-of-date language there, which is really problematic. So, yeah.
Also, I kind of like to look at the bias of these questions into the therapy about the details of the details. If you would like to say that what you concept
Mhm.
I feel around some of these things. I was thinking about maybe the person who's asking the question, and I think they would know something we can typically and would probably change the way you answer the question.
Yeah, that's a different spin on the Milgram experiment, isn't it? It's a different type of authority figure for sure. Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that idea. But yeah, I mean, we see this blend over even to some things that are were problematic for certain groups. So for example, the halo effect is part of what they call like the model minority idea, the idea that like, for example, Asian Americans are all really good at math, right? And while that's like a positive stereotype, not all everyone who's Asian American is good at math, right? So it's a bias just like anything else. So yeah, then you assume people who are of that descent are going to do well on your task, and when they don't, you're like, well, right? Yeah. Guess what? People are individuals. What? Shocking. Excellent. Yeah, those are some great examples. All right, group 3. What biases might exist in terms of who gets hired in science? Science. Yeah, then you must be thinking about RWS readings from yesterday, which, yeah, those are like people who, women who are mothers are like least likely to be hired, least likely to get a good salary. Men who are fathers like get the best salaries. So it's like, oh, well, they're providing for their family. And we still have this idea that women are going to be in the home. But yeah, we see these in science and it's really problematic. There are horror stories of especially young faculty of color and young female faculty. And again, you can think about how all those things might intersect, right? You're going to read a reading about intersectionality for Friday. They have been like stopped outside their office and like accused of breaking into the school and people standing outside their office saying, I'm waiting for the professor when they walk up, things along those lines. There was actually a hashtag a few years ago that was, I look like a professor, because it's better now than it used to be when you Googled like English professor, it's just all white guys, like old white guys, right? So yeah, all these things can come into play. And in fact, there are studies, I may have mentioned this in here before, I don't remember, where they give people the same exact resume, but one group gets it with a woman's name on top and one group gets it with a man's name on top, and the man is more likely to be hired and the man is more likely to get better pay. And they've also done this with what they call ethnic names, right? Like not super waspy names. And again, if you have like a white name, you're more likely to get fired and at a higher pay than someone who has a more traditional regional or ethnic name. So this is obviously problematic. This is why some people will just submit resumes with their initials. My grad advisor actually, when she first started publishing in the 80s, published as J.H. Crowther instead of Janice Crowther, because if her stuff was more likely they could accept it, even though like reviews are blind, you still have that editor bias. So yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, this is one of the reasons why we gave our daughter a gender neutral name, because we were trying to help her get ahead in the future. So, but it should not be that way, obviously. All right, group 4, what biases might exist in terms of who or what gets published in science? Yeah. If you are, hopefully if you've gone through a PhD or a master's program, you've gotten some training in how to navigate this, right? That makes you more likely to be published. But yeah, especially if you are, academia has systems. Let me give you an example. So when you submit something, I would say, and again, these are me making up statistics, but I would say probably 9 times out of 10, if they don't automatically reject it, they want you to make some revisions. It might even be 99 times out of 100. It's just part of the process. This is why you have expert reviewers reviewing. And there is an art to crafting your response to those. Like if they ask you to do something that just doesn't make any sense, you have to tactfully say, basically, thank you for that suggestion, but we decided not to do it for these reasons. And my advisor really taught me well how to do that. And we had some really weird situations we had to navigate. Like we went through, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of revisions with one of our pieces. It got accepted and they sent it to us to just do like final copy edits. And they sent the original one we submitted, like before all the revisions. And we had this like ethical dilemma of like, do we not tell them? It just, we told them, right? But like, you have to find ways to like tactfully tell people like, whoops, you made a mistake. And if you don't have someone guiding you through that, right? Then you might not know how to navigate that. You might turn people off with how you respond to things. Things along those lines. Yeah, I actually saw a debate on Twitter last night about how reviewers need to be trained to give constructive feedback, right? And that's something, again, I was trained to do, but a lot of people might not be. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, right? And navigating that system. And one thing I didn't mention yet was having time to publish, right? If you are a young parent, right, it might suck up all your time and you might not have time to write, right? If you are a young faculty member, particularly, let's say a faculty member of color or a faculty member of minoritized gender or sexuality, you might be asked to be on every diversity committee the campus has, right? And while you might be really passionate about that stuff, and that's great, every time you're spending time doing that, it takes away from you being able to work on your own work. And depending on the institution, that could sabotage your ability to get tenure and stay there. It could also sabotage things like pay increases based on merit. I'm actually, while you guys were doing that, I'm reviewing an article, trying to give them constructive feedback about pay for academics in the UK. And they have a big system based on merit. And it's like, who gets to decide what's merit, right? That's a big issue. All right, group 5, Henry and Will, tell us about biases that exist on VWU's camp. Did you guys have more? Sorry. Oh, okay, go, sorry. Sorry, go. Go, sorry.
Limit what we know, so they can
Mhm.
say certain topics and say, no, we don't want that to be out here, them to like know certain things. I feel like that's a huge one when it comes to publishing and making.
Yeah. One of your readings talks about that. And yeah, they will, sometimes you get what's called a desk rejection, where like the editor looks over your paper and just says this is inappropriate for our journal before they send it to reviewers. And sometimes it's that, right, that they just decide, oh, I don't want to publish topics about that. Then that might be a really important topic and they're gatekeeping, and then you're like, where do I publish this, right? And maybe you find a good home for it, but it's in a lesser caliber journal, which might not get it seen by as many eyes. That's a really important point. Thanks for bringing that up. What else do you have? I don't want to cut you all off. I'm sorry.
We good.
Okay. Alrighty. Okay. Now to Henrietta. So what biases exist on VWU's campus in the natural sciences and or the social sciences? Think about how they're taught and what is taught, but also about who is doing the teaching.
So we noticed that, especially in the natural sciences, there tends to be a bias towards the honor students.
Mm-hmm.
The professors on campus, not just in the natural sciences and the social sciences, but like every department, tend to be older white men. So our students being on the younger side tend to get dismissed a lot more, specifically the females. And we do have some classes that are more inclusive than others, but they mostly just focus on one topic or background. So like literature classes that focus strictly on African-American literature or East Asian literature, certain social histories and cultures, they tend to just focus on the one thing.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a really good point too. Yeah, I think a lot of it, we tend to have mostly male professors. I think the psych department is a little unusual in that we're all under 50, right? Like, we don't see that in other departments necessarily. Yeah, and I think that not only female students, but students of color, first generation students here, there are a lot of people who don't understand, don't have empathy for situations you all run into. Like, I can't tell you the number of horror stories I've heard in the past year that are unrelated to the pandemic. Like students getting shot in drive-by shootings, students having family members die, students having just horrible things happen to them. And every single time I've been like, take as much time as you need, do what you need to do. And a lot of professors don't do that, right? They're lacking that basic like empathy, and that's heartbreaking for me. And to be honest, I've been that way in the past. I've been like, no, deadlines are deadlines. So I'm evolving, and I hope that other professors will too. Yeah, I think a huge thing, I've heard, actually, Will and Henry, I should point out, I've heard that about the honor students from other students, that they feel like the honor students get more resources and things like that. And Yeah, I think that a huge thing is that we don't have that many faculty of color, right? So I think we have 5 African American and maybe 2 or 3 Asian American professors, and that's it. In terms of, well, I think we have 2 or 3 Latinx too. But
Our
like,
diversity committee doesn't have a single person of color on it, last I checked.
really? Oh my God, that ticks me off. Wow. Because it was, when it first started, Dr. Hooker was in charge of it. Who, if you don't know her, she's in English, she's African American. Sometimes I have to take a deep breath. Is that what you're talking about, Will, or is it a different committee?
I'm not entirely sure if there are multiple committees. I might be talking about something different, but I remember it was a big issue last summer when everything was going on with making Juneteenth a national holiday. And a bunch of people brought up on social media that the entire diversity committee on Virginia Wesleyan campus was white men.
Interesting. I wonder if there's like an executive diversity. It's like the PCIC does have diverse people, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say on that.
Yay! Good voices. So yeah, there is a like, and that's like staff, faculty, students, administration, right? There is that committee, but yeah, I wonder, when I hear old white men, I tend to think administration, so I wonder if they have their own diversity committee. And I mean, we don't have anyone of color up there to be on those committees, unfortunately, right? So yeah, you see all kinds of potential sources of bias that we need to be aware of. This is a big part of critiquing science, right? If we think about who gets published, who do we get to read, right? Things along those lines. I made big efforts last year to take classes like theories of personality, which is typically like old white dudes with a couple ladies thrown in, right? And try to bring diverse voices into it. And when I told other clinical psychologists I was doing that, they were like, where are you finding them? Like literally, they were like, obviously only these old white guys did things. I was like, we have Ruth Howard, who was the first woman to get a PhD, African-American woman to get a PhD, and did really interesting like genetic research on personality stuff. But the idea that we just like, are like, what do you mean they exist is really problematic. Okay, excellent job. The next thing you're going to do is individuals. So if you want to go back to your normal seats, feel free. If you want to stay where you are, feel free. But this is sort of building off the activity you did a couple weeks ago. So you're going to make a copy of the document. And it's right underneath the group discussion activity you just looked at on assignment on Blackboard. So this is going to be pretty similar to the assignment we did where you looked at articles for your final project with the hierarchy of science, and then now you're going to look at them with bias. So you're going to do this individually, your name, your topic. You're going to search for and provide notes about 2 articles on your site for the myth of controversy. And they should be different from the ones from the source assignment earlier. Basically, I'm trying to help you find all your sources for your project, like in class. And describe what areas of bias could exist in each study. So like we talked about here, you're going to think about broad topics, but you can think about bias and who was asked to participate, who agreed to participate, the questions like one of our groups brought up. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, so it's up to you. Once I'm through walking through the instructions, if you want to go back to your room and work on it, you can, or if you want to go to computer lab, you can, whatever works best for you. Cool. So here, instead of that chart, which like kind of worked last time, but was really annoying to put stuff in, I just made it a little more spread out. So it's like chart questions, but spread out. So 2 different sources, APA style, and answer these questions about bias, and also just general things about the study, again, to help you with your final project. So I'm here if you have questions, float around. So again, to get to this, you go to assignments on Blackboard and scroll all the way down. And the group activity was sources of bias, and this is called bias in sources. I did not intend to do that last night, but then I sort of chuckled to myself because I was tired, so. So yeah, go ahead and find 2 articles, and yeah, if for some reason it's just not working for you here in the classroom, you can feel free to head out, and then once you find your 2 sources, you can also feel free to head out, so. Again, just trying to give you time in class to work on that final project since it's a doozy. See you Friday. Oh, good. And then there's a place to turn it in, or you click to get the assignment. So.